I think there's a lot of concern, in Japan and the wind and bringing, nuclear.
Oh, I gotta tell you that story then. Okay, there was a woman, I actually saw her speak. She was playing in the playground in Nagasaki when the bomb fell on Nagasaki. So she was at ground zero. When they found her, she was 2 stories up, buried under some rubble. So they picked her up, her family did, and took her to the country and fed her brown rice, miso soup, seaweed, umeboshi plums, vegetables, burdock, leafy greens. She got rid of the radiation poisoning, and I saw her give a talk at French Meadows, about 88, 89. And so 80, let's say it was 89, so that's 45 was Nagasaki. So that's 44 years later, and she was 12, so she was 57, 56, and she looked fantastic. And she'd had 5 healthy children.
Wow. Hey, the Cora, there's another story about a hospital.
Yeah, I was about to tell you that, right. Yeah, because there was this doctor who was a student of George Osawa, and when he heard that the bomb had dropped, he got all his patients into the basement, either 30 or 40 of them, and he fed them all miso soup, brown rice, seaweed, vegetables, etc., and not one of them got radiation poisoning, not one. So as long as you make sure you're getting your seaweed and your miso, we've just started doing that, because I normally don't eat seaweed and miso and pickles. I don't normally do that once in a while, but now we started doing it every day.
What about someone who's really exposed to high levels?
Well, I mean, you're at ground zero, that's high level. This was, I don't know when Chernobyl happened, I guess it was the late 80s, right? Somewhere around there. And anyway, what happened was that these 2 doctors prevailed upon the hospital to set aside a ward where they'd be fed nothing but macrobiotic food. And somebody, I can't remember, maybe Diana Aberley knows the story, I think she was involved. We all got together and sent money in to send a container to Chernobyl. Miso and seaweed and brown rice and all this stuff. And all those children healed of their radiation poisoning. Every single one of them in that ward. So it's documented. It's not as if this is, but you see, nobody wants to get this out there because this empowers people.
What's going to happen?
The facial diagnosis, because it's actually the most important organ system in the body as far as health and healing goes, is the intestines, as I've mentioned many times. So it's really important to really focus in on the digestive tract in terms of facial diagnosis. Okay then, and then we have here. So, now as I mentioned earlier, the upper lip shows the condition of the upper digestive tract, the lower lip shows the condition of the lower digestive tract. Now what, in the healthy human being, this dimension, X, should equal this dimension, Y. Meaning if you draw a line across upper lip and lower lip, X in a healthy human being will equal Y. And this is what happens when you start eating macrobiotically. Most people, before they start eating macrobiotically, and most people in the world today, have swollen lower lips. This means, and this is large intestine, this means that the large intestine has got chronic intestinal stagnation, which is actually also going on in the small intestine, but you don't see it because the small intestine is here. It's very rare for this to be so swollen that it's like this. You do see it, but it's very rare, right? So now, as I mentioned before, we all have a line that goes around like this, around the face. And the other thing I didn't mention earlier, I told you about this line that goes across here, that's in the skin on either side. And above that line is kidney. And this is right kidney. And this is left kidney. If we have bags under the eyes like this, which is very, very common, that is general intestinal condition. Now the other place we see the eyes, which I did mention earlier, the intestines, is here. And this is bladder. This is small intestine and this is large intestine. Now everybody has lines etched in the face, in the forehead rather. Right, like that. Anything from 3 to 7. If those lines are prominent, that means there's swelling here. So that means there's swollen intestines. They're too yin. Okay, so then the other feature is, as a result of really chronic intestinal stagnation, what happens is we get a line, a lump forming right here. And it can get so bad that we form jowls. Those are, I call these the colon bulge. And most people have these who have not done their ginger compresses. I mean, there's people in macroitis. I mean, yeah, because this is a really important topic, facial diagnosis, because you know the whole trip that everybody is encumbered by in a dreadful way, most of the American and world population in the developed world anyway, is that they are trapped in the web of error known as modern medical science. Because people have not been given the tools deliberately, I think. You know, I'm a very, very strong conspiracy buff. I believe in conspiracies to make people enslaved psychologically and emotionally and physically to the system that the powers that be have set up, because the whole purpose of the system is to make us into passive consumers and vegetable couch potatoes, consumers of goods and services of one kind or another. That's really what it's all about as far as they're concerned. They don't want people to be independent and free. That's the last thing they want. So no matter what the talk is of freedom and democracy, spouted by the politicians and whatnot, it's all a bunch of hooey. That's not what they're interested in at all. So the thing is, my whole strategy to combat the machinations of the powers that be is there's a threefold strategy. One is we buy gold and silver to be economically protected, because the whole strategy that they have is to make us into economic slaves. That's one of their strategies. So we have to counteract that by buying gold and silver, because as the price, the purchasing power of the dollar depreciates, that means that the price of everything goes up. That's priced in dollars, which means it's going to cost you more to just be able to make it through the day with your food and your clothing and your shelter, and having electricity and so forth. All those things are going to be becoming more expensive. So if you don't have any way to counteract that, then that means you're going to have to be working more harder and be more dependent on welfare in order to be able to make ends meet. So like right now, the amount of families or people, the percentage of the population that's on food stamps goes up every month. You know, it's like 48 million, I think, right now, the amount of people that are on food stamps. And it goes up every month, you know, and it's like $130 a person per month. That's what you get to pay for your food. And so the whole purpose of buying gold and silver is to keep your purchasing power. So to give you an example, is that in 1952 you could take 2 silver quarters, you know, made of silver, pure silver, and that would buy a family of 4 a meal. 2 silver quarters. Last week we bought a meal for the 4 of us that lasted 2 days for $40.
Yeah.
And what's the price of silver today? $40. So 1 ounce of silver bought us, our family, if we'd paid for it with silver, a meal for 2 days. So that's what we mean by maintaining purchasing power. That's why we're buying gold and silver. We're not buying it because we want to get rich. If that happens, that's a bonus. You know, we're buying it because we want to protect our standard of living that we're accustomed to. So then, that's one part of the strategy. The other strategy is to emancipate ourselves from the medical track. That is the second part of the strategy. The third part of the strategy is to develop ourselves spiritually. So we're grounded strongly in spiritual reality, which is why I teach the Steiner material. So this lecture is about the facial diagnosis is because facial diagnosis is a tool which is very accurate